Armand Jean du Plessis, Cardinal de Richelieu, did not simply rise to power. He engineered his ascent with the precision of a military campaign, the patience of a spider, and the cold intelligence of a man who believed nations should be operated like machines. Born in 1585 into a noble family that possessed more pride than money, Richelieu learned early that the world rewarded those bold enough to take what others hesitated to claim. His father died when he was young, leaving debts and titles but little else, and his family's survival depended on carving out influence in a France where influence was the only true currency. Originally destined for a military career, Richelieu pivoted toward the church when the family needed someone to secure the bishopric of Luçon. He embraced the role not out of devotion but out of opportunity, studying theology with such ferocity that he became bishop at 22, demonstrating the trait that would define his life. When a door appeared, Richelieu walked through it before others even noticed it existed. France at the time was a mess, a kingdom in name, a battlefield in reality. The wars of religion had fractured the country into Catholic fanatics, Protestant fortified cities, corrupt nobles, rebellious princes, and a monarchy so weak it could barely command its own palace guards. Louis XIII, timid, insecure, overshadowed by his mother Marie de Medici, and haunted by the legacy of his bullish father Henry IV, needed someone who understood power not as a privilege, but as a craft. Enter Richelieu, elegant, sharp, soft-spoken, observing everyone and everything with the detachment of a scientist studying insects. His early alliance with Marie de Medici brought him into the royal orbit, but when she turned against him, as Marie turned against everyone eventually, Richelieu made the cool calculation that defines great statesmen and terrifies lesser ones. He switched sides. He courted Louis XIII with a mixture of loyalty, intellect, and strategic humility, making the king feel not dominated but strengthened, not replaced but completed. Louis XIII needed a father, a general, a strategist, a conscience. Richelieu provided all four. In 1624, he entered the Council of Ministers. Within months, he became the gravitational center of French politics. Everything bent around him. France had never seen a statesman like him. He centralized authority with a ruthlessness that made nobles tremble, bishops shiver, foreign diplomats panic, and the king feel, for the first time in his life, truly in control. Richelieu's foundations were simple: break the nobility, break the Huguenots, break the Habsburgs, and build a France so strong that no king would ever again rule at the mercy of aristocratic whims. He began by attacking the noble pastime of dueling, which killed more aristocrats than wars. Richelieu banned dueling entirely. Nobles ignored him. Richelieu executed them. Not many, just enough to send the message that the state alone had the right to kill. Next, he dismantled noble conspiracies. He uncovered plots before conspirators finished writing letters. He arrested dukes, exiled princesses, executed traitors, and turned Louis XIII's feckless brother Gaston into a symbol of aristocratic futility. Every conspiracy ended the same, with Richelieu calmly presenting evidence, the king nodding stiffly, and another noble kneeling before an executioner. Then came the Huguenots. France's Protestants were not rebels by belief, but rebels by structure. They held fortified cities, private armies, and political autonomy. They were a state within the state. Richelieu tolerated their worship, but could not tolerate their independence. La Rochelle became the decisive struggle. For over a year, he blockaded the city, starving it while personally supervising the siege. From behind a massive seawall, he ordered built even under enemy fire. When La Rochelle fell, the Huguenots lost their political rights. France gained unity. Richelieu had cut out a tumor while preserving the patient. Then he turned outward toward Europe. The 30 Years' War, a conflict that turned Central Europe into ash, gave Richelieu the ultimate stage. The Habsburgs, rulers of both Spain and Austria, were the superpower of the age, wealthy, vast, religiously rigid, and arrogant enough to believe Europe belonged to them by divine right. Richelieu disagreed, and so he did the most audacious thing a Catholic cardinal could do. He funded Protestant armies to fight Catholic Habsburg forces. He bankrolled Sweden's Gustavus Adolphus, encouraged German princes to rebel, supported the Dutch revolt, and quietly sabotaged Spanish finances. Europe gasped. Rome complained. Richelieu shrugged. For him, politics was not a moral battlefield. It was an equation. France must rise. Rivals must fall. Religion was a tool, not a compass. His famous doctrine, raison d'etat, the reason of state, declared that the survival and strength of the nation were above morality, above tradition, above treaties, above the church. This idea would define modern politics for centuries. Meanwhile, Richelieu built the first modern French state. He strengthened royal intendants, replacing noble privileges with administrative governance. He reformed the army, expanding and modernizing it. He rebuilt the navy. He supported colonial expansion, Canada, the Caribbean, Africa, and created economic institutions that would later feed Louis XIV's golden age. He turned France from a medieval kingdom into an emerging modern superpower. But great power breeds great hatred. The French aristocracy despised him. Marie de Medici plotted his downfall repeatedly. Queen Anne of Austria saw him as her tormentor. Foreign ambassadors called him a demon in red. Poets mocked him. Pamphleteers slandered him. Assassins tried to kill him more than once. Every time Richelieu survived, some said he made dark pacts. Others said he was simply luckier than most. But the truth was simpler. He prepared better than everyone else. His spy network, the Cabinet Noir, intercepted letters, listened at keyholes, bribed servants, and built psychological files on half of Europe. Richelieu often knew conspiracies before conspirators made them. But the cardinal was not invincible physically. His health was a battlefield he lost daily. Migraines, fevers, crippling asthma, abscesses, suppurations, internal infections. He coughed blood into linen handkerchiefs while dictating policy. He traveled in a rolling throne, almost unable to stand. He slept little, worked constantly, and survived on iron will alone. Still, he continued. Always, because Richelieu was not a man doing a job. He was a man executing a vision. Near the end of his life, conspiracies intensified. The king's favorite, Cinq-Mars, plotted to remove Richelieu and even negotiated with Spain to divide France. Richelieu uncovered the plot, presented the evidence, and had Cinq-Mars executed, proving yet again that Richelieu's enemies never understood the game they were playing. In December 1642, dying slowly and painfully, Richelieu summoned Louis XIII. When asked whom he recommended as successor, he named Mazarin, ensuring that his system would survive him. He then asked the king if he had done his duty. Louis XIII, a man emotionally incapable of expressing gratitude, replied with the most honest words of his reign, "Yes, you have served the state too well." Richelieu died at 57, exhausted but victorious. France mourned him publicly and celebrated privately. Nobles breathed easier. The church exhaled. Spain rejoiced, but the people who mattered and were statesmen, diplomats, generals, and kings understood the truth. Europe had lost not a cardinal, but an era, and France inherited something priceless, the machinery of modern power. Richelieu created the centralized state that Louis XIV would later wield like a weapon. He proved that administrative efficiency beats aristocratic chaos, that espionage beats tradition, that intelligence beats privilege, and that political will beats every obstacle. He showed that real leadership requires coldness, foresight, and the ability to sacrifice anything, including popularity. Richelieu's legacy is visible everywhere, in centralized government, standing armies, national administration, state-sponsored diplomacy, modern intelligence services, and the doctrine that the state's interests outrank private morality. He was the original political technocrat, the first modern strategist, the blueprint for ministers who rule from the shadows. And in the end, he remains the perfect example of a truth few rulers admit. Kings may wear crowns, but the world is shaped by the hands that adjust them. 1. Scene. A boy born into fate and nobility